Dan, your initial reaction when all of this came down this morning was?
Well, obviously a surprise with the Chauncey Billups angle. The Terry Rozier part of it, that's kind of been simmering out there a while. But obviously, when an NBA head coach gets arrested, it sort of brought me back to 2017 when the FBI was looking into college basketball corruption. And obviously, we could talk about that and where that didn't go. It really didn't have much of an impact at all on how college basketball was operating. But I do think, to me, there's two separate stories here. There's obviously the legal ramifications involving the individuals, and that's interesting and how strong these cases are. Ultimately, the mafia angle, right? That's fascinating, and it's going to provide us a lot of fodder. I think there is a larger story here, though, that we need to get our arms around, which is, are we at a tipping point here in terms of the coziness between leagues and sports betting? Um, People have been warning about that for a long time. And I feel like we may be now brushing up against a point where there is going to be a bit of a backlash. There is going to be a push to maybe have more legal protections, more standards, things to maybe at least try to argue against the sort of free reign of gambling that we've seen for the past decade.
But what is there to do? I think is my question, Dan. We've seen players get the death penalty. We've seen players get banned from the league for life for being
Yeah.
involved in sports gambling and in rigging games. What more can the NBA do? At what point is the onus not just totally and completely on the players for following the league rules?
Well, for sure. And look, we've always had gambling scandals in sports going back
Mhm.
100 years, right? This is not anything new. And we've seen game fixing and we've seen Tim Donaghy. I mean, you can just go down the line at all the different scandals that have popped up in pro sports and college sports, um, sort of, back UNLV and Richard the Fixer and stuff like that. Okay. But I do think there is a more cultural component to this, which is that we have taken all of the shackles off the gambling industry. We've made it so pervasive in society. It's obviously causing issues individually for people in terms of their financial situation and getting in trouble, especially young men. I mean, there's all kinds of literature and scientific study on this and the potential negative consequences. And I do think you're just sort of amplifying that into the arena of pro sports where there is, I think, just a lot more tolerance of gambling in general, right? And how does that impact the way players and coaches who are in the leagues view their own activities? And yeah, the onus is on them. It's personal responsibility and 100%. But I do think you have to sort of question whether there is enough deterrence on the front end of this. Obviously, there's going to be a
Mhm.
huge wake up call effect when you see Chauncey Billups get arrested. Okay. But I just think we need to start thinking about gambling and its impact in society more broadly, not just involving a small number of athletes.
Dan, that's sort of the deep, I saw the meme a few weeks ago where it's like I went from, ripping a bong in the back of the parking lot of Taco Bell, hoping to God that a cop wouldn't find me, to hitting my pen in the middle of Target. Like the society has changed a lot on some of these things. It is, I felt that to my core because I feel like half the time I'm walking through a grocery store, I'm like, wow, I used to get arrested for that smell, and now it's just in the middle of Stop and Shop. Like there is this sort of pervasive thing that has changed in culture, and you're right. Like you've got kids now and before they're ever NBA play, before they're college athletes, you've got kids out there that are the day they turn 18, they're like, yep, boom, I'm 18. I'm going to start gambling. Some figure it out earlier than that, right? And they got the app on their phone and they're rolling. By the time they get to the point where they're blocked on it, they're already used to doing it. And I don't know how you fix that. Like this is your tweet. We were talking about this. The
Mhm.
NCAA voluntarily loosened the rules to allow college athletes to bet on pro sports yesterday. But then when that college athlete becomes a pro athlete, they're not going to be able to bet on pro sports. They'll be betting on college. Like, how do we do this? Like when the shackles are being sort of loosened at the college level, that's not going to make it easier on the NBA in 5 years.
No, because you're asking people to live up to standards with very sort of fine lines, right? And I don't know how you expect people, just take your standard college quarterback, okay, who's got some money because of NIL, right? And now they've got access to a account on one of these gambling sites. And okay, they can go bet their parlay on Sunday, but it's honestly not that much of a leap for them to say, okay, yeah, but what about a college game? Like maybe to all of us, that line should be very clear. But to someone who's 18 and they don't really understand about maybe the detection, how sophisticated that part of it is, maybe they just don't know, right? They're not going to pay attention in the briefings and the meetings. We were 18. Were we paying attention when people were lecturing us about do this, don't do that? I mean, come on, right? So I don't really understand what the NCAA is doing other than they don't want to use their investigative resources, which are limited in the first place, on trying to find out whether somebody's starting quarterback made a otherwise legal bet on an NFL game. Okay, I get that, and so their stance is abstinence only doesn't work. But at the same time, you're just causing all of these lines to be blurred, I think, and I believe you're opening yourself up to more problems than you're solving by, at least from the NCAA standpoint, making that legal.
I do have to push back a little bit because I think about how many universities have partnerships with beer companies. You can now sell beer and alcohol in college stadiums. We don't say, well, when a player turns 21, that temptation of, his team or his university having advertisements for Bud Light in the stadium. I think we view gambling so differently because it is so new. Because it's only been what, 7 years, less than a decade since sports gambling has been legalized. And I'm with you that it is wrong to break the rules. And I think that we are opening ourselves up to a very scary type of society where sports gambling is so easy and we can just open up our phones and do it with the tap of a button. But to say that, 18-year-olds never listen to rules. Well, you get paid like an adult now. So now you need to follow the rules like an adult. To what point are we just clutching our pearls a little bit with sports gambling? And to what point do we just need people to follow the rules?
I hear you, and I am certainly sympathetic to that point of view. But I
Yeah.
think when you're talking about integrity of the game, right? Because that's what ultimately this is
Yeah.
about: is integrity of the game. You have to be extra vigilant on that, and that's why I don't necessarily buy the comparison to drinking and alcohol ads. I mean, that's a personal problem that you don't want people to become alcoholics, okay? But this is integrity of the game. Now, you could probably eliminate a lot of this stuff by just getting rid of prop bets. Prop bets are, I think, the root of a lot of the issues when it comes to integrity of the game because they're so easy to manipulate. And obviously, we saw that with Jonte Porter, and we've seen that with some of the cases that are coming up in college sports where, this a sort of random, seventh best player on a Mountain West team gets popped because they were betting the under on their own prop bets. Like, why do we even make that available? Okay. But that to me is where you do have to really take into consideration the money element of it, right? Because people get in debt gambling. That makes them
Mhm.
vulnerable to actions that would directly impact the integrity of the game. And so when that happens over and over again, like you just have to take a step back and maybe just put a hard stop here and say, we need to rethink this whole thing.
I
Yeah.
think to that
I'm
end,
with you there.
let me speak as the
Yeah.
old man on the block here too. Like the drinking age was changed to 21. I think it was the early 80s, 82, 84. When I was a kid, that there was the same way we talk about gambling now is how we talked about alcohol. Oh my God, you can't have alcohol near college campuses. That's like kids can't control themselves. Like to your point, Caroline, I think because it is so new and because it is something everybody's adjusting to having this level of availability, like look at the end of the day, like you're right, alcohol for a whole generation now, it's like, yeah, so what? There's beer on and around campus, not a big deal. In the 80s, oh my God. And that's when the same concept again around like marijuana and the way that we're viewing it now versus the way that it was viewed in the 80s and 90s. Like I think you just culturally you have to have it around enough that it at least normalizes to the point that it's not seen as this great new wild temptation, So I do think that part of the reason this comes into play is because we've just normalized the fact that alcohol is everywhere. But I don't want to gloss over the fact that, in the 80s, the concept of cigarettes being advertised to children, because man, kids can't stop. They can't resist these ads. They're pointed towards kids. And then it was alcohol sponsors on football games. How could they ever do that around kids? Like, those were real conversations when I was in high school in the 90s about society. Like, when we decided that music was the reason that kids were suddenly going out and doing terrible things. It's like, we do this. It just happens to be gambling, and gambling is so new right now. I just think that's part of the reason, at least to throw that context in the conversation, Caroline.
Yeah, it's all fair and good context that when things are new, I think that you open up Pandora's box and sometimes things just kind of settle out and the average, the mean averages out itself. But then I do want to get your perspective on the NCAA side of things because you do such a wonderful job covering college sports for Yahoo Sports. It was just announced yesterday that the NCAA it will now allow college athletes to bet on sports outside of college sports, which is the timing on there is truly could not have been worse. And we talked about this with the NBA that if all of these things come out and Terry Rozier and Chauncey Billups are found guilty in a court of law, that looks poorly on Adam Silver, and Adam Silver may be the one to have to answer for that. Adam Silver may be replaced as commissioner of the NBA. Let's just say things go crazy and wild in college sports, that we find all of these college athletes rigging games or betting on their own team, betting on college sports. Who in the NCAA or who in college sports is to answer to that as Adam Silver answers to the NBA?
It's definitely harder to assign blame because, just as an example, with this particular rule that they approved yesterday that opens up betting on pro sports for college athletes and staff members, it had to be approved by all three divisions. So first Division I approved it, and then it went down the line. And so you had to get the approval of the entire NCAA, and they did that. Now, I think they have been influenced by a propaganda campaign that has said, all right, abstinence only doesn't work, and we can't use these investigative resources on this stuff. But the NCAA is playing from behind here from the jump street, okay? Because they have been relying in some cases on the federal investigations of some college athletes who've been involved in this type of activity, and then they come in behind and levy these bans, these punishments. I just think they want to take it off their plate. That's really what I think the NCAA wants. They don't want the blame. They don't want any. They don't want anything to do with it. They want the feds to handle it, and they want to spend their time chasing down, improper benefits and all the old traditional stuff. This is just too big for them. So who's to blame for that? I don't know. It's obviously influenced in some degree by Charlie Baker, the NCAA president. But at the same time, I don't know what he has influence over anymore anyway. I mean, he's fairly irrelevant when it comes to managing college sports, as is the NCAA at this point. They are more worried about NIL and all this other stuff. But this is a big problem on their hands. And that's why I think their big focus is just get rid of the prop bets, and they think this will take care of itself. I think maybe they're right on that to some degree, but at the same time, I'm not sure how they can actually get that done because they're going to need Congress or some type of regulatory body to come in and do that for them.
Dan, let's say everybody's found guilty in this whole process, and it's worst case scenario for everything that we found out today. In a year, does it change anything about the way that the NBA is actually doing business?
Well, I think a cynic would say you look at how much money that the NBA is taking in from their various gambling partners, and maybe you would say no, right? I mean, because they're relying on that revenue. They're very much in bed with the gambling industry, and I don't know if they can control it at this point.